Okay. Well, welcome everyone to our workshop for Mennonite World Conference with community peacemaker teams focused on land and water protection. Can everyone hear me okay? Great. I'm excited to be with you all this evening or afternoon or night or morning, whenever it is. A few announcements here at the start. There's live German translation, which you can reach by clicking language at the bottom. Everyone should click on either English or German there. And we are being recorded, by the way, for those who've come new to it. This Mennonite World Conference, we are more aware than ever of ongoing ecological collapse. Climate crisis, pollution, and other environmental problems threaten the health and safety of so many, sadly, especially the poorest and most vulnerable. Creation is threatened, and so are we, God's children and partners in creation. We're also more than ever at this World Conference aware of the many different directions where leadership is coming from throughout the world. We're seeing social movements, peacemakers and change makers, and the globalization of faith communities. I hope that this sense of globalized leadership shines through in our presentation today. I would like to begin with a thought on creation care and on environmentalism. Actually, I'd like to begin with a question for all of you. We will all write answers to this question together in the chat below. You can click on the chat. This is called a chat storm when everyone writes at the same time. I'd like to invite you to write whatever comes to mind as an answer to my question, which is, what are some of the first things people think of when they hear environmental protection? What do people think of as protecting the environment? What do you think of, and what do you think others think of? Let's just write whatever we think what comes to mind when you think about protecting the environment. Does everyone see the chat? Yeah, we've seen so far, for those of you who can't necessarily read the chat, we've seen recycling, fencing cows out of streams, good public policy, composting, avoiding using plastic, God's love for humankind and joy in the earth, and put in getting solar panels. There are many fairly inwardly focused ways that we think of living differently and of our communities working differently that are often what we think of when we think of environmental protection, when we think about what we think about doing or what we think about getting. Our awful courts, another one. These are basically all good things and important things to think about when we consider protecting the environment, and we all need to take and encourage steps like these. I want to propose today, though, that environmental protection has other very important parts, not necessarily focused on us at home, wherever we are, but often focused on people who might be far away, who might be working to stop corporations or militaries from destroying the natural world on a massive scale, or colonists. In places like Colombia and Brazil, people are killed very often while protecting the rainforest. In places like the US and Canada, people are in jail, sometimes for life, for having protested massive pipeline projects. And we will learn today as well about Iraq and Palestine, where there are other crises, where the connection of people and the environment is coming together. Showing solidarity with people who are safeguarding land and water is an essential part of protecting the environment together. Community peacemaker teams has taken on this vital work of solidarity with people whose land, water, and livelihoods are threatened. It's done similar work for decades. Community peacemaker teams was founded by Mennonites with the name Christian peacemaker teams, and in its early years was largely staffed by us Mennonites as well. And CPT is still partly led by Mennonites, like Program Director Milena Rincon from Colombia, and staffed by Mennonites, like Esther Kern and Nadi Vaca, who we will hear from today. But CPT has also grown to include many non-Mennonite, non-Christian leaders and staff, people who not only share the vision of solidarity and dismantling oppressions, the vision of CPT, but are also open to doing long, hard, sometimes dangerous work for years in contexts with intense conflict and oppression. Not everyone is willing to take on such challenges, and all CPT staff are to be thanked for embracing this hard, uncertain, often discouraging work that is far from the stabler career paths that many people choose. And acknowledging the many who come from traditions that are not Anabaptist Mennonite, CPT recently changed its name, adopted the name Community Peacemaker Teams, which much more accurately represents the communities that together form this community. This is a different direction from that of Mennonite World Conference, and it's important to be honest about difference. As I believe you will all see today, though, there are huge shared values. As an Anabaptist Christian personally, I'm absolutely convinced that we should cherish what CPTers around the world are bringing to the table. CPT, which grew out of the Anabaptist tradition, still has so much to teach it, and I know that will be evident in what we hear today. Our first presenter will be Natalia Vaca Bastidas, CPTer in Colombia since 2014, has been a full CPT member since 2020. She's also been a member of the Mennonite Church in Ibagué since childhood. Welcome, Nati, and we look forward to hearing from you. Are you able to hear me and take over?
Hi, David. Thank you so much. And hi to everyone. So, okay, let's start. So I would like to start to say to everyone, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to each and everyone from wherever you are listening to us. For me, it is a pleasure to be here with you, and it is an honor for me to be able to share with you today some of the work of CPT in Colombia and our partners. This in relation to social justice and the protection of land. So, as David said, my name is Natalia Vaca Bastidas, and I have been part of CPT from the Colombia team full-time for 2 years, but I have been part of CPT and supporting this work since 2014. And yeah, this is, and also part of the, I come from the traditional Mennonite tradition, sorry, and I have been active part of the Ibagué Mennonite Church. So please give me a little moment. I would like to show you some slides about the subject that we are going to talk today. So I'm going to share my screen. So please tell me if everyone can see the presentation.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Okay. Before I start, I would like to share with you something very nice and interesting to tell you about, and is the connection between the Mennonite Church in Colombia and the CPT. So, because it is precisely thanks to the invitation of the Colombia Mennonite Church that CPT arrives in the country and decides to start a program here. Over the years, the Mennonite Church and CPT have accompanied some of the Saints' community processes. And also, through the years, CPT received several delegations from the church, and later many delegations members became CPTers. So Colombia was the first CPT program to have members from the same country. And that has led to the fact that today all CPT programs have national members. So for me, I think this is very nice and a very beautiful relationship between the Mennonite Church and the CPT. So today, I am calling you from the city of Barranca Bermeja. This is a city characterized by its extremely hot weather, and this is also located near to one of the most important rivers in Colombia, which is the Magdalena River. This river is an important tributary of water for our country. It goes to the end of the country and is extremely important for commerce and for transportation, and is very important for the riverside communities that we accompany. So this is the point, and this is where I want to share with you what the CPT program in Colombia accompanies small farming communities. Because the work that these communities do and cultivate the land make a very special bond with it. And not only with the land, they have a very special bond also with the animals and with the nature. Their environment and their territory are born from their roots, their culture, and their knowledge. And this in turn allows them to manage their environment in the most respectful way possible, since they are one with the land. So it's important here to emphasizing that in Colombia, for small farmer communities, the land is the source of life. But on the other hand, for agribusiness, it is a source of power and to produce money. And they don't care of the repercussions that they cause to the environment, both in their way of producing as well as in the commercialization. So they don't see the terrible damage that this is doing to small producers. So small farmers who cannot compete against such an industrial monsters. So what does it mean to be a small farmer in Colombia? I'm going to introduce to you one of the sister and partner communities of CPT, the community of El Guajabo. This is a community of wonderful, beautiful, warm, hospitable, but about all resilient people. This is a community that for more than 70 years has resisted through active no violence in its territory. It's experiencing evictions and persecutions, living the armed conflict in their own flesh, suffering, forced displacement, and violation of their human rights. So, what has motivated these people to stay and resist despite all these circumstances? I think the answer is simple. The answer is the love for the land, their land. So the small farming communities of El Guajabo defend the bodies of water and the arable land. For them, the land is a source of food. That is a source of life. It is the basis of their culture. It is a source of their subsistence, the root of their community organization. The relationship with the nature and the environment gives to them security and meaning for their lives. So I think this is a very beautiful relationship between the community and the land. But also, in Colombia, we have a problem. Colombia is one of the most unequal countries in terms of land ownership in the world. Large companies have changed the vocation of the land to subject it to exploitation and monopolization. this word is hard for me, monopolization. Historical, we have been submerged in an internal armed conflict where one of the great triggers was precisely the concentration of these lands in the hands of a few. The figures are alarming, perverse, and cruel. Some of studies reveals that 81% of the arable land in Colombia is in the hands of large landowners. Which means 1% of the landowners. And the remaining 91% of the land is distributed among the small farming communities, which means 99% of the landowners. So much of the land, much of these lands was acquired by large landowners, was through violence displacing millions of people in the last 60 years of war. So also to this, we add the lands monopolized for the implementation of mining projects that consume the landscape and ecological diversity of a daily basis. Can you imagine what this means? Is not all this a cry for help from the creation? I think my dream and that of many people in Colombia is that these lands return to the hands of small farming communities like El Guajabo, a community that, thanks to the production of food, sustains themselves and that of many people in the country. Communities that struggle for a small piece of land to care for and for honor it as a source of life. So my dream is that in this large station of lands, we can see a multitude of small farmers where communities can live and produce food, having a good standard of living for their families and also helping us to ensure our food sovereignty. But the reality is not this. Today, there are no benefits for the small farming communities or for the people. The land has been designated for constant and related exploitation that is growing at a rapid rate. And this is where the importance of a small farming communities, such as El Guajabo, being able to remain in their territories' lives. May they, with their genuine love, be able to cultivate and strain the land as a fundamental right of life. So finally, I want to share with you this very special versicle of the Bible, so we can remember together Genesis 1 verse 31, who says, "And God saw everything that God had made, and behold, it was very good." I think the divine has entrusted this land to our care. And this is precisely what the small farmer communities in Colombia do, care for it. Today, we feel that this land, the God's creation, is only happy when a small farming works and sings to it. The creation is only happy when we take what is fair from it and return love and care, just as the admirable work of millions of small farmers in Colombia today. So I think with this I end, but I want to encourage you to hold us in your prayers, and I encourage you to value with much more meaning and love the work of small farmer communities around the world, because this is the way of solidarity with land and water protection as an essential part of sustainability and food sovereignty. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nati. Thank you very much, and appreciate your thoughts. Our next presenter, our next presenter is Esther Kern. After a 34-year career as a registered nurse, Esther joined community peacemaker teams. This commitment has taken her to CPT projects in Iraqi Kurdistan, in Palestine, Israel, in Colombia, on the US-Mexico border area, and Indigenous communities in Ontario, Canada. As a member of the CPT Turtle Island Solidarity Network, she stands in solidarity with water protectors and land defenders in Ontario, including Grassy Narrows, and she most recently worked in the Wet'suwet'en Territory in British Columbia. Thank you so much for sharing with us, Esther, and I'm going to give it over to you.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Nati, for providing me with the segue to my presentation. Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 reads, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Following in succession, God created day and night with sun, moon, and stars, then land and water, a diversity of plants, the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, and the animals on the land. Finally, God created human beings and placed them in the Garden of Eden." The conclusion of this Genesis passage reads, "And God saw everything that had been created, and behold, it was very good." God then gave a directive to humans to care for this miracle of creation, to be wise stewards and caretakers of the land and the sea, and all the inhabitants and living beings on earth. And this directive applies to all of us still today, and how miserably we have failed. Nearly 15 years ago, I could have imagined myself in a Garden of Eden in Northwestern Ontario around Grassy Narrows First Nations community, also known as Asopishosiwagang. This community of 1,500 people is part of 28 Anishinaabe Nation communities which signed Treaty Number 3 with the Canadian government. They have lived on this continent since time immemorial and live in the boreal forest, a land of approximately 1 million hectares. I'm going to invite each one of you now to come with me for a visit to this garden. Grab your CPT hats and off we go. Close to the community of Grassy Narrows is Slant Lake with its sparkling blue waters, nestled in the lush forests of spruce, pine, and birch trees. Canada geese honk overhead as they fly in formation and land on the water with noisy splashes. Loons swim by gracefully, giving out their plaintive, haunting calls and diving suddenly into the depths of the water for a fishy meal. Trumpeter swans announce their arrival on Slant Lake at twilight, and in a frenzy of white wings, complete their mating dance and ritual before settling down for the night. A moose and her baby calf appear in the shallow marshes on the other side of the lake. Foxes, woolly black bears, and deer make their presence known as well. The sun casts a warm golden glow during the day. At night, a full moon rises into a star-studded night, casting black and silver shadows over the land. As the temperatures dip down, we snuggle deeper into our sleeping bags as a chorus of night sounds lull us into slumber. However, just as evil lurked in the Garden of Eden, there too is a sinister presence in this area of peace and tranquility. This sinister presence crashes into our consciousness as we arrive at Slant Lake. Overhead, stretched across this gravel logging road, is a tattered canvas banner which reads, "Freedom from colonialism, freedom from racism." In the days that follow, we will interact with the Grassy Narrow residents, and they will share with us story after story of their painful history. What has happened to this garden of God's creation is shameful, largely because of human activity and our materialistic, consumer-oriented lifestyles. There have been 6 major assaults on this community. Number 1, in 1873, Treaty Number 3 was signed, and the Aboriginal communities, including Grassy Narrows, were guaranteed the right to hunt, gather food and medicines, trap and fish on Crown land. But this also signaled the decline of their culture as they knew it. Before the treaty was signed, Grassy Narrows was located on the waterways and islands of the English River system, and the community was completely self-sustaining. Assault number 2. In 1950, Ontario Hydro built 2 dams upriver without consultation or compensation. As a result, the rising water levels flooded sacred sites, burial grounds, wildlife, wild rice beds, and made river travel unsafe. Assault number 3. In 1963, the Grassy Narrows community was forcibly relocated from the English River to a new site, a reserve of 14 square miles with a population of about 1,500 residents. The move resulted in family groups and clans being split up, and in the new rocky location, the soil is too poor to plant and grow vegetable gardens. Assault number 4. The residents also live with the legacy of pain and suffering from the residential schools, which were designed by the Canadian government to assimilate Indigenous children into mainstream society. The schools, which were operated by Catholic, United, Presbyterian, even Mennonite churches, ripped away at least 150,000 children from their families and subjected them to emotional, cultural, spiritual, physical, and sexual abuse. Some estimates of those who died are as high as 50,000. Recent evidence of 215 unmarked graves found at a residential school in Western Canada merely confirms this reality, and the expectation is that many more unmarked graves will be found. Now, adults, many of these residential school survivors have lost their parenting abilities, their language, traditional knowledge, and skill. You may be aware of the recent delegation of Indigenous peoples traveling to Rome to meet with the Pope and receiving a formal apology from him for the painful legacy of the residential schools. The plan now is for the Pope to arrive in Canada on July 24th to visit several Indigenous communities as moving another step toward reconciliation as a recommendation from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the 94 calls to action. Assault number 5. Since the 1950s, logging has been ongoing in the areas around Grassy Narrows by Abitibi Consolidated. Their method of operation was clear cutting, which reduced the rich forest and habitat of many species of wildlife into a graveyard of stumps and slash, devoid of life, destroying ecosystems. As the forest is being clear cut without consent, the Indigenous peoples are being denied their right to pray, gather medicines, do ceremonies, hunt, trap, fish, and take recreational time in the forest. Nothing with culturally appropriate and long-term qualities is being given back. In 2002, after Grassy Narrows blocked the logging road to the site, community peacemaker teams were invited to come as a full-time presence, to stand in solidarity, to support, to get in the way of violence, document human rights abuses, and advocate for a peaceful resolution to the conflict with the logging company. And guess what? It worked. In 2008, the logging company pulled out of the area as a direct result of the 5-year blockade and publicity campaign by Grassy Narrows residents, environment, and human rights groups. On a hot, sizzling day, and I can imagine this in Colombia, what is more refreshing than a glass of cold, pure water fresh from the kitchen faucet? As a privileged citizen of European descent on Turtle Island, otherwise known as Canada, I have access to clean water whenever I want or need it. Water is life and essential for the health and well-being for all of life on our planet. But this is not true for many of our Indigenous brothers and sisters, the original inhabitants of Turtle Island. And this leads to assault number 6. The most devastating assault of all was in 1970, when the Ontario government finally admitted that the Reed Pulp and Paper Company in Dryden, Ontario, had dumped over 10 tons of mercury upstream in the Wabigoon River, about 100 kilometers from Grassy Narrows. The mercury-contaminated water caused Minamata disease in the residents, causing much suffering and death, with about 90% of the residents affected, and as recently as a study which was issued in March 2022. Fish had been a staple part of the diet of Grassy Narrow residents, but with the mercury contamination, fish could no longer be used as a food source. Fishing lodges operated by local residents had to be closed, adding to the economic woes of the community. And at one time, the unemployment rate was as high as 90%. This mercury contamination still plagues the communities in Northern Ontario, and recent studies have again shown high levels of mercury remain in the soil, fish, and river sediment. Clearly, the creation which God had declared as very good has been polluted, exploited, marred, and is on the verge of complete destruction. In June of 2017, after decades of activism by the Grassy Narrows community members, from chiefs to mothers to youth, and with community peacemaker teams standing in solidarity, the Ontario government committed to $85 million to finally clean up the mercury contamination. This includes the building of a healthcare center within the community to provide care for those residents with end-stage mercury poisoning. As former Chief Simon Fobister said, "This river is the lifeblood of my people. For too long, we have suffered from this preventable tragedy. May this be the beginning of a new era of hope for my people, and may justice flow at long last." The Ontario government, however, as governments are, has been very slow in delivering on its promise of providing these monies. For that reason, CPT has joined other social justice groups in organizing an action called River Run in order to hold the government accountable. There had been previous river runs, but the next one is going to be coming this July from the 18th to the 22nd in Toronto, the capital of Ontario. A busload of around 50 residents from Grassy Narrows, identified as water protectors and land defenders, along with knowledge keeper Judy Da Silva, will travel the 1,700 kilometers to Toronto, where they will be hosted on the University of Toronto campus. The event will include public education gatherings with Indigenous presentations, a news conference, and a march through the city of Toronto to highlight the plight of Grassy Narrows and the unkept promises of the government for an environmental cleanup. Grassy Narrows people are powerful leaders in the movement of Indigenous sovereignty and environmental justice. They hold so much wisdom, and we have much to learn from them. They inspire with their resilience and championing the basic human right to clean water. So basic. But so much is still needed to right the wrongs of mercury poisoning in their community. Their demands for Ontario and Canada are, number one, fair compensation for everyone in Grassy Narrows affected by the mercury crisis. Number two, respect for the Grassy Narrows Indigenous protected area, and to end mining and logging in this area, plans for which unfortunately are starting up once again. And 3, support Grasineros in restoring their community and way of life from the damage that mercury has done by cleaning up the river system and constructing the healthcare facility. Perhaps once these demands become a reality and right relationships have been restored, we can once again say, God saw that everything that had been created, and behold, it was very good. Gracias, danke, thank you. So be it.
Thank you so much, Esther. Thank you for that. Yeah, and especially to you both, Nati and Esther, for the ways that you brought, together the love for the land and the love of the people in Colombia, in Grasineros, for their land and the need, yes, for justice. Our next presenter is Tartil al-Junaidi from Palestine. Tartil is a human rights observer from Hebron. She started with CPT Palestine in 2019. She has separately volunteered with several women and youth organizations. She graduated from Bethlehem University with a bachelor's degree in sociology, and she's passionate about advocacy and raising awareness about injustices. Thank you so much for sharing with us today, Tartil, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Nati, Esther, for the amazing presentation. And thank you, everyone who's here watching us. It's such an honor, and I appreciate your presence. So I will talk more about the climate injustice in Palestine. And when we talk about this, it's not a new issue. It started since Israel began, because it's man-made by the Israeli occupation. And it's a tool that Israel used to control many aspects of Palestinian life. And like now, Israel control over 85% of the land of the West Bank. Also, they control over 87% of water sources in favor of the Israeli settlers in the West Bank. I will talk more into 2 parts. I will focus more in the land and the water. For the land, Israel makes sure to cut off the relationship with between Palestinians and the relationship between Palestinians and their environment. Since 1948, Israel demolished and destroyed the fruitful trees that Palestinians used to rely on as an income, also as a food security source. And he changed that to area planted with non-native vine trees funded by the Jewish National Fund to remove the Palestinian character of these destroyed villages. Also, to make it more familiar for sure for the immigrant Israeli settlers that are coming from Europe and the US mainly. Also, another example, in the 1950s, Israel banned the breed of a black goat, which is a Palestinian native breed that the Bedouin Palestinian used to rely on for food security and as an income as well. as animal husbandry is one of the main income and lifestyle for the Bedouin community in Palestine. And they claim that the black goats actually are having a false and having an negative impact on the environment. However, in the recent years, many fires has happened in Israel, and they discovered that the black goat would help preventing these fires. And in 2017 or 16, Israel allowed having black goats again. Now I will focus more on Area C in the West Bank, and mainly in South Hebron Hills, where CBT has a presence there since the 90s. Israel is restricting Palestinians' access to land, to their agricultural land, and to the grazing area. CBT is accompanying the community there, and Israel has been systematically limiting Palestinian shepherds to the grazing area, using different tactics, just like shooting, arresting, and assaulting them. At the same time, Israeli settlers are building many of settlers' shepherd outposts in the same areas, and even in areas that are prohibited under the Israeli law itself. And that means more limits for Palestinians to have access to their land and to the grazing area for their shepherds. And of course, give settlers more access to the grazing land, which usually lead to, as settlers usually brutally assaulting Palestinians. Last year in March 2021, Rima and Saeed, husband and wife from Susia, a village, a town in South Hebron Hills, they went to their land on a Saturday, as every Saturday, to check in the land, check any crops, and however, they were faced by over than 40 settlers attacking the land, stealing the crops. Saeed tried to prevent the settlers and expel them from his land. However, 40 settlers attacked him and his wife. Many fractions happened to Saeed in the jaw, and the head, in the skull, and many injuries all over his body. Also, his wife Rima got many injuries and many bruises all over her body. Many Palestinians do not have access to their agricultural land, so it becomes a wasteland. And that is what is happening to Palestinians. Many assaults trying to have access to their lands, either from Israeli soldiers, the military, or from Israeli settlers. When we talk about water crisis in Palestine, let's focusing more on Area C. There is over than 70% of Palestinians are not connected to water network, and most of people face water shortage and rely on tankered water, or have to buy water from and they have to go to the closest town to get water and rent a truck to deliver them the tanks of water. And this process, one of the community member in Al Majaz, also another town, another small village in South Hebron Hills, told us that this process cost around $300 US only for one tank, and most families in this area cannot afford. And if you have any idea of the WHO recommendation of water consumption per person per day is 100 liters. However, the estimated consumption of in these communities is 20 liters per person per day. So we have 100 liters. This is the ideal, the minimum, actually, the minimum consumption of water as is recommended by the WHO, and 20%, 20 liters, per person per day. And for the West Bank is it's 79 liter, and that is making the animal husbandry is almost impossible in summer, as it's depending on to water. Palestinians are prohibited from having access to water for their daily humanitarian use. And Palestinians also get punished and tortured, arrested for stealing from their own water in this area, as they don't have access to any of this area. You are not allowed to build a water wheel in this area. You are not allowed to construct water pipes. And if you want to do these, you have to get a permission from the Israeli government and pay a lot of money, and you will wait a lot. You will wait lots of time. Also, mostly you won't get this permission because your city or the village, the area you're in, must have a master plan, and it's almost impossible for villages and areas to have a master plan. And that is what our partners from many organizations are doing in the legal aspect, to try to have a master plan for these villages to prevent the demolition of the building, the houses, the structure, and the water pipes. Lastly, these measures threaten the sustainability of Palestinians and their existence in the area, as the food security and animal husbandry is main source of income, and also in decimate their lifestyle, as it's create a corrosive environment that Palestinians are not able to cope with the climate crisis effectively. In order, that is the aim, the actual aim is to displace them from their own land at the end. So when we talk, we here talking about climate apartheid, as we see two people living in the same area, same land, but experience climate change very differently. Israeli policies and practices increase Palestinian adaptivity to climate vulnerability by undermining adaptive capacity, by denying Palestinians to self-determination and controlling land and resources, as well as fragmenting Palestinians. There is always a lot to talk about, a lot of examples to talk about. However, we have some limited time here, and I want to respect the time in here. Thank you, David, and thank you all for listening.
Thank you so much, Tortillo. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's of course, yeah, very heavy, and appreciate bringing us into that set of experiences and significant challenges. And thank you so much for the solidarity that you're showing there and that all of you are showing in your work and your CPT teams. Our final presenter today will be Mohamed Salah. Mohamed is a Kurdish activist. He served as a teacher for 22 years, comes from Iraqi Kurdistan. He's been working with the CPT team since 2007 and is a full member. Welcome, Mohamed. Thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Thank you so much, David. Thank you, Nati, Tartil, and Esther. Thank you, everyone. It's very nice to be with you all today in this moment. Actually, before I start, I have a question for everyone. It's up to you if you want to answer or not. You can just put your answer on the chat. What comes to your mind when you hear there is a country called Iraq or Iraqi Kurdistan? What comes to your mind, or how you describe Iraq in your mind? Feel free if you want to answer. If don't, don't worry at all. And maybe David, you can help if people share their. I can read it actually. Trauma and war, terrorism, war. Yeah, so these are some war, another war. A few thousand Kurdish people described it from refugees in the 90s in my hometown. Thank you so much for your answer. I'm gonna start. Well, there is another one. Beautiful country with many natural resources. Yes. Wonderful Kurdish neighbors. Thank you. Well, CPT Iraqi Kurdistan is working here in this country in Iraq. Actually, the history go back since 2002, before the US invasion. But this team, CPT IK, Iraqi Kurdistan, moved to this land here since 2006. I'm with the team since 2007. I'm gonna share my screen. So hopefully I can help with some, let's see. Am I allowed to share screen, David?
I had thought so, but I will check again into making you co-host. Is it working?
Yes.
Sorry
Okay.
about that.
So you can see the slide, yeah? So Iraqi Kurdistan nature under the threat of Turkey's bombardments. So one issue is this team is working on is the cross-border bombing by Turkey and Iran. Turkey and Iran have conflicts with those Kurdish opposition parties who are somehow located alongside the border between those three countries, Iraq, Iran, and Turkey. And the reason I'm showing this picture, it is very clear helicopter. And this helicopter, I think, if I'm not wrong, it's called Apache. It's from US. So there are many countries who are providing Turkey with weapons. US, Canada, Germany, we can name a lot. So those cross-border bombing happening even by drones. So as you see in this picture, and to give you some basic data, since 2015, Turkish armed forces have been killed up to 129 civilians, Kurdish civilians inside Iraqi Kurdistan. And this conflict is going on for about 40 years between Turkey and PKK. since 2007, up to 180 civilians wounded due to this conflict. And here are two CPT members who are visiting one of the recent wounded farmer due to the cross-border bombing by Turkey. So Turkey is not only bombing the region, Turkey is also occupying the region. So I don't know if you could be able to see in this picture, there is a Turkish bases. So whenever Turkey is bombing some areas, some villages, and then the villagers, they have to be displaced. So far, more than 500 villages displaced. When these villages are displaced, then Turkey is taking the land. Another sad number, since 2007, again, because of the Turkish military operations, 444,789 hectares of land have been burned. So it's not only killing people, not wounding people. Now we are talking about how this conflict or this bombardment by Turkey is impacting the nature, the land, the environment of Kurdistan. In this photo, you see that sometimes the villagers by themselves, they have to extinguish the fire. So not only lands burned, unfortunately, wild animals also being killed. Deers, birds. So because of these, people here in Kurdistan are, especially activists, are against this occupation. They are against this bombardment. I'm showing this picture of these activists. It's known as Badinon Prisoners. These activists, some of them are university professors, journalists, activists who speak out against this occupation. But the Kurdish Authority in Iraqi Kurdistan, they arrest these people and they put them in jail. And CPT, IK team, accompanied the families of these prisoners. We observed the court trials of these prisoners. We observed 23 court trials to make sure that there is a fair trial happening. So not only CPT, alongside with other organizations, besides some few consulates, also they came to the court trial to observe that. The good news, all these people are now released after they finished about 2 years sentence. So alongside those activists, we as a team also joining other groups who are doing some environmental event. For example, in this picture, we joined a group of people to plant oak seeds or to oak trees, because oak tree is a very popular tree in Kurdistan and people want to plant oak tree every year. In another picture, this one also, we joined different group to plant more trees. Today, actually, Facebook reminded me of this picture. 7 years ago, we joined another group to clean one of the river in the city, in my city. It's called Slemani, and it was very coexistence that's happening while I'm having this presentation with you all here. Luckily now there are several other local organizations and international organizations. We have a campaign. It's called End Cross-Border Bombing Campaigns. So before this campaign, we had a local one. It was called Here As Now, Stop the Bombing. But it was more focused on the local levels, like to advocate for the people and to talk to the government, like Iraqi government, Kurdish government, to take some step to stop those bombing. But now this campaign has become more broad and it's more internationally. So for example, we have people from Code Pink. I don't know if you are familiar or you hear about Code Pink are joining this campaign. We have people or organization, it's called UPP, it's from Italy, Un Punta Per. So there are some other international organizations. Together, we are trying to put more pressure on the international community and the neighboring country to stop those bombing and to not harm the land, the people, and leave us to live in peace. One thing I just want to share with you is it's one of my dreams that one day I hope that my country will be occupied by people like you, not by military of your states. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mohamed. Thank you. It's amazing to me on that thought of you know, the Facebook photo showing back up in your feed after 7 years. I mean, what I understand of local environmental protection is that it is so enriching and beneficial to have this long-term connection. And the idea of you know, helping to clean a river 7 years ago and helping to plant trees now, I just find very beautiful and very, very hopeful. So thank you so much for that. A couple more things before the end of our workshop here. We have, through CPT, I should say, there are 2 campaigns that both connect to these themes that we've talked about today. Can everyone see my screen that I've shared? There is an earth campaign and a water campaign, and these are both kind of focused on, they partly talk about CPT projects, but they also highlight ways people can engage themselves, ways to learn about, in the case of the Earth Campaign, soil conservation and decluttering and cleaning, and ultimately inviting people to consider making a commitment, making a pledge to help care for the Earth at a local level, as well as to be engaged in solidarity globally and regionally. And the water campaign, I'm not doing a good job right now of bringing up the other campaign because my screen here is too big. Here we go. The water campaign, the Water is Life pledge, is similar, except focused on water and focused on knowing where your water comes from and where, where resources ultimately flow from and to in your region, in your area, and thinking about water and who has access to it. Also a theme in a number of our presentations today. I am posting the links to those campaigns in the chat, so you can see that CPT campaigns water and earth. And finally today, I would just like to end with thanks. Thank you so much to those of you who shared with us. Thank you so much, Tatil and Mohamed and Nati and Esther. I want to thank as well Astrid and Dorothee for your translation into German. Really appreciate that. I want to thank as well Salome and for your support here with the tech and for joining us. And thank you all for joining us in this discussion of environmental justice, and maybe some different ways we can understand that from what we would most often think of. I would also welcome questions from participants for any of the presenters. If anyone has any questions or things you'd like to hear more about or push back on, you are welcome. Okay, well, it sounds like we got to hear many different themes and a complete picture of solidarity and how we live that together. So thank you all so much for joining today. I wish those of you who are maybe even on location, but who are participating in Mennonite World Conference a blessed and a wonderful week. Thank you again to you presenters and guests from CPT. And I will end our recording now. And thank you so very much. All the best to you all.